open up my soul. But babe, how could I know you're cold? Shame on you. Should have seen what you were like. Dangerously nice. You got me all lost, so blinded. You got me all lost. Listen to my heart. I gotta be lost, survived it. Now you're all gone, my friend. Oh Lord, I guess you fooled me once, but I ain't falling twice. All lies. Oh Lord, I ain't gonna run. My rise has just begun. I'll shine. Shame on you. Should have seen what you were like. Dangerously nice. You got me all lost, so blinded. You got me all lost. Listen to my heart. I gotta be lost, survived it. Now you're all gone, my friend. Paper cups will come around. I'm still walking, I'm still proud. I never lost it. I never lost it. I never lost it, baby. Paper cups will come around. I'm still walking, I'm still proud. I never lost it. I never lost it. Paper cups will come around. I'm still walking, I'm still proud. I never lost it. I never lost it. I never lost it, baby. Paper cups will come around. I'm still walking, I'm still proud. I never lost it. I never lost it.
It ain't no thing to do my thing, it's what I did the best. I copped that crib and bought 2 chains and then I hid the rest. And it's okay to do your thing, but just don't do the most. I put my friends in that old Benz and took that to the coast. It ain't no thing to do my thing, it's what I...
Hello, everyone. It has been an interesting week, to say the least. Another week of HBCU football is in the books. But one, given everything that's transpired today, it makes you wonder what's more interesting, the weekend that was in HBCU football, or the day that is right now, with respect to some of the comments that have been made on social media. I am joined by the usual crew: Kendrick Marshall, senior editor; Chris Stevens, special contributor; and our very own Jared Hoffman, who is also a special contributor who will be joining us for today's episode. We want to thank you all for joining us on HBCU Sports Live. We ask that while you take a moment to watch us, take a moment to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel so that you'll be notified for future updates going forward. Gentlemen, let's get right to it. The big news of the day, and which is why I indicated earlier, one has to wonder what was bigger, the weekend of football that was, or the tweet that was put out by Tomekia Reed, in which she ripped 60 Minutes for the portrayal that they had of Jackson during the feature that they did on Sanders. Um, Tomekia Reed indicated that 60 Minutes should be ashamed for the way they portrayed it. And obviously, that comment led to obviously conversations on social media, on Twitter, and some of the Facebook groups that I tend to frequent. And while majority of individuals were in agreement with Tamika Reed, there actually were some individuals who thought that what 60 Minutes, the clip of that house, or the portrayal that they may have intended for Jackson was actually in bounds. So my question to you, gentlemen, and anyone feel free to chime in, fair or foul, in terms of what 60 Minutes did with respect to the few seconds of B-roll that they showed for Jackson compared to Boulder, Colorado, where Deion Sanders is currently the head coach right now.
I thought that I could understand why people were upset about it, especially if you're from Jackson, because to set it up, 60 Minutes did a feature on Deion Sanders and his move to Colorado and all things he's been doing out there. And so, in one segment of the interview, they showed B-roll of Jackson, which included like a mural and then like this dilapidated house in this like very dilapidated looking neighborhood. And they tried to compare that to Boulder, Colorado, which has all these pristine sites around its city. And then they cut to the interview of Deion Sanders talking about like how he never been to Boulder, Colorado before, never been skiing, never had done these things as a Southern boy that he's experiencing now as a coach of Colorado. And so a lot of people, including Tomekia Reed, took it as another instance of where not only a city that is highly populated with black people, over 80% of people in Jackson, Mississippi are black. Um, they took it as to say, well, this is another instance of the media portraying a predominantly black city in a bad light, based on aesthetics. And I would agree with that. I understand what CBS was trying to do with their portrayal, but maybe you don't want to use like unidentified black woman standing outside of her home to try to make a comparison of like this is the slum that Deion Sanders left to go to the big house in Colorado to try to make a comparison. No, you could have done with facilities, you could have done with salaries, you could have done with anything else except paint poor black people in the light that you did without explaining the context of how the conditions ended up that way. And so, in that regard, I think Tomekia Reed was right to try to call out 60 Minutes for their portrayal because it was not inaccurate. Like, you can go to any city in America. I'm pretty sure Boulder, Colorado has some pretty sketchy areas too, um, just like every other city does. Just try to say, hey, like, this is the worst part of their town compared to, I guess, Palo Alto, California, if Deion Sanders were to go to Stanford. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, it was fair that Tomekia Reed, who lives in Jackson as the coach, obviously she's from Jackson, was able to send her message out there, hey, like we don't deserve to be painted this way, just to try to justify Deion Sanders moving from Jackson State to Colorado.
Chris Stevens, your thoughts?
I'm gonna lead with a old journalism school lesson. I was fortunate enough to be taught by Dwayne Wickham, who of course worked at USA Today as a columnist for many, many years. He's helmed journalism schools at Delaware State, Morgan State, North Carolina A&T. First thing he did in our ethics and media class was have us watch Citizen Kane. Now, if you're not familiar with Citizen Kane, It's the movie featuring Orson Welles that's about World War II age. And there's a part in the movie where Charles Foster Kane where says to his photographer, "You supply the pictures, and I'll supply the war." This is about the Spanish American War of 1898. If you're not familiar, it's based off the life of William Randolph Hearst, a legit publisher. But Professor Wickham had us watch that movie to kind of explain to us how the perception of media matters a lot. And this was in the early 20s. This movie came out in 1941. So we're talking about a movie 82 years old now, still has lessons to be taught in journalism in 2023. And that, of course, is how present things is how people will take them. And if you're gonna, as Kendrick said, put an unidentified black woman on a dilapidated porch house in Jackson, Mississippi, then you cut to this, transplendent water fountain and a kite store. What are you saying? What
Right.
I mean, that's what blew me. Like, I was just like a kite store. Like, can you get any more, shall we say, non-African American? We'll say that. A kite store, really, and it was very irresponsible on CBS's part, and it would have been nice for Coach Prime to push back on that. But I feel like Jackson State, unfortunately for him, is an out of sight, out of mind thing. Because I'm going to say something that's either going to be taken very poorly or somebody's going to say he's got a point. I'm cool with either one. Just watch your mouth when you talk to me. That's all I'm going to say. Deion Sanders has been about Deion Sanders from the time he left Fort Myers, Florida in 1985 to go to Florida State. That's who he is. That's always who he's been. And for people to blindly follow this man, and I'm not saying he's not a great coach. I'm not saying he's not an all-time great athlete. Everything that Deion Sanders has done in the light of what we perceive to be good is well-earned. Hall of Fame football player. Great baseball, no, not great. Solid baseball player, we'll say. And, now has proven himself to be a motivator of young men as a college football coach, which is all cool. But don't mistake his success for anything outside of who he is, and that is a very strong self-promoter. So when he went to Jackson and talked about changing the culture of Jackson State, changing the culture of HBCUs, I took that as lip service, and of course, not less than 4 years later, he is changing the culture somewhere else. That's who he is, and he didn't push back on that. He didn't, his main thing was, oh, I've never been to a place like Boulder, Colorado, and God said that my mission was done in Jackson, and now it's time for God. And God said my mission was now in Boulder, Colorado. God listen to everybody, don't he? That I mean, if he talks to everybody, and if he talks to everybody, he's not this all-seeing force is no different, has no different view for anyone else than he does for Deion Sanders, despite what Deion Sanders thinks. So,
Sure.
so I would my thing is with Deion is don't put God where you most likely made your own decisions. Like, I mean, granted, faith is something that is a touchy subject for someone like myself who identifies as agnostic, just for the record. That I mean, you believe who you believe. You believe in what you believe in. You believe who you believe, and I don't take that from you, and I don't want anybody to take that from me. But at the same time, it just feels very self-serving to just keep, acting like, okay, this religious force is just guiding you from the television booth to Talladega College to Jackson, Mississippi to Boulder, Colorado. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. That's just my opinion on it.
Jared Hoffman, your thoughts?
We as journalists have a job to get the best possible story we can out to the public. In doing that, oftentimes, we tend to neglect people who are unintentionally thrown in the fire as a result of us just trying. The story was what Deion Sanders leaving Jackson State for Colorado. In that, the community and the city of Jackson was just made to look like the most the most dirtiest, the ugliest place that you would never want to go. And all of a sudden, it's Deion Sanders left this impoverished black city to go to greener pastures at Boulder, and it was uncalled for. And people, first of all, Tomekia Reed did not call out Deion Sanders. That's the most important thing about this. She called out 60 Minutes because 60 Minutes is the problem here. It's not Deion.
And she went out of her way, just to, not to cut you off, Jerry, but she actually went out of her way to make sure and to emphasize that this was not about Deion Sanders, and that she was appreciative of Deion Sanders for the time that he was there, and that she even roots for him now that he's at Colorado. So, good point. But go ahead, Jared. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of things we can fault Deion for. This is not one of them. This isn't one of them. He's done a lot of things that are very questionable. He's said a lot of things that are very questionable. But this is only about 60 Minutes. Because 60 Minutes needs to realize that that person that they showed on that screen in front of that house, she is somebody's mother, or she's somebody's daughter, or she's somebody's friend that somebody cares about genuinely. And you making her look, whether you intended to or not, we get it. You're just covering a story. Understood. But you got to understand that people are hurt by your portrayal of that city. There are people that love that city, including Tomekia Reed, who is from there, apparently, and she has coached there for however many years and has had success with the Jackson State women's basketball program.
She's a Jackson native. She didn't have Jackson State, but she is a Jackson native. And it's
Right.
understanding, be sensitive to how her hometown is being portrayed in the national spotlight.
All I'm saying.
Right.
That's all I'm saying is you got to be.
Yeah, Ken, and I will say this though, to put a wrap on it, maybe like imagery like that by 60 Minutes and some of the comments that we see on social media, and even some of the comments we see from like high profile former athletes in the media have been used to disparage not only JSU, but black colleges in general, as why they don't deserve a coach like Deion Sanders, as to why they don't deserve to have success, as to why they don't deserve to be prosperous compared to schools at the upper echelons of the Division I level. And so it's up to people here on this screen, people who are watching our show right now, to work really hard to debunk some of the misnomers about HBCUs and how they're run and how much people care about them and how to position themselves comparatively to other universities. Because this issue with Deion Sanders leaving Jackson State, and even when they're at Jackson State, brought out a lot of people who had no investment in black schools before, just in Deion Sanders. And then when he left to Colorado, they followed him there. Also, they made some very harsh comments about the university that were untrue, about how they felt that state treated him wrong, that they didn't do enough to keep him there, that a real school would have done everything possible to keep this golden goose there. And Jackson State, because it's a black school, they fumbled opportunity. And during the 6 Minutes piece, it was mentioned that Deion Sanders, part of the reason why he left was because he thought JSU didn't have the foresight to move forward with the university. But it's the same school that had the foresight enough to hire him in the first place.
Right, exactly.
When no other university wanted him to be their coach. He had made overtures to FBS programs before. Jackson State, Arkansas was one of them. We know documented Florida State was one of them. We know that. But it took Jackson State taking a risk and saying, hey, like, we want you as our football coach. And I don't know many other schools in America who would lay their hat on a guy who, number one, didn't have a degree when he applied for some jobs. Number two, had no head coaching experience at the college level. And Jackson State and Ashley Robertson took the initiative to do that. And both sides benefited from it, obviously. But to say Jackson State had the foresight is not a very good comment to make. But I would say this to end it. I think like us in our positions, we need to be more responsible with how we report on black colleges at all times, because like this has revealed to me how so many people have a deep seated resentment of black colleges and a deep seated resentment for black people.
Yeah.
And so I would hope that we can be better as a people and not be distracted by some of these things we've been distracted by the last couple of years.
Well, let me say this to that point, Kendrick, because this isn't. I'm in complete agreement. But do any of you find it somewhat surprising that there were actually folks on social media who look like us, who attended HBCUs, may not have necessarily attended Jackson State, but individuals who attended HBCUs within the SWAC, who one I know who made the comment, I've been to Jackson several times, and I see nothing wrong with what they did. I'm paraphrasing, but there are literally some people who are on social media saying, I don't see what the big deal is. What do you say to those folks or about those folks?
I say that there's a disconnect because we do it. I mean, as much as we can talk about how the conditions of white supremacy and different things separate black people. We do a damn good job enough separating ourselves by the way we treat ourselves. From how much money we make, what kind of clothes we wear, what kind of car we drive, even down to the institutions we attend. Because there's been a long simmering bit of business between black PWI grads and black HBCU grads. It's almost like Bloods versus Crips, Hatfields versus McCoys, macaroni and cheese versus potato salad. Whatever you want to put up, whatever you want to put up against each other. That's what it feels like at this point. And it makes no sense for us to be divided like this when we're all, helmed, trying to get out from under the thumb of the same issue. And I think that a lot of people, it's just a matter of how you were brought up, because I can tell you now, I grew up on the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. If I go back over there now, I'm not afraid for my life, even though, people are like, Jesus Christ, they drive over that side of town, they freak out. It's like, well, if you mind your business, you ain't got nothing to worry about. But, certain people, black folks that have, to paraphrase the Jeffersons theme song, moved on up, they've also moved out of that state of mind of being a community. And that's why those people who are like, talking down on Jackson and HBCUs that went to HBCUs, they feel that they're better than the people that actually live in the town. And that's where the disconnect comes in. That's why I feel like, Kendrick is right on the mark with saying, we as journalists have to do a better job and be mindful and cognizant of the messages that we put out there, because that's only going to enhance the feelings of resentment that certain black folks have for other black folks. And we, at this point in juncture in the history of the United States and the history of black people in general, we can't have that. We need to be unified and on the same page, because if we're not, then it's just going to get worse instead of better.
And I'll just say this real quick. I know we got to move on, but I will never be surprised by a group of people that say they created their little HBCU at their PWI. So I'm going to just leave that there. So, but as far as the HBCU grads saying that they wasn't mad about the portrayal, I mean, Deion's brand goes way beyond anything that could happen at Jackson State. So there's people that will always defend him. He's been famous longer than most people who are still in college has been even thought of. So people got to think, this man was in MC Hammer's music videos in the early 90s, back when MC Hammer was at his peak. He was at Atlanta. He turned Atlanta up. He went to San Francisco, immediately won a Super Bowl, went to Dallas the next year and won a Super Bowl. This is just to paint a picture of the kind of fame that this man has. And then he comes to Jackson State. He brings out all the celebrities. He brings all the glitz and glamour. He brings it everywhere he goes. That's the man that we're talking about. So it's no surprise. It will never be a surprise to me that black people, PWI, HBCU, people that didn't even go to college, probably never even would have thought of going to college. They're always going to defend him in any way. And anything that hurts us, and when I mean us by HBCUs, they don't care because we're an afterthought. We're an afterthought at the end of the day because they don't really love us like they say they do. So no, I don't. I will never be surprised. If black people, HBCU grads or not, I will never be surprised at people saying that the portrayal of us is fair. Never.
Wow. Okay. We could probably dedicate an entire show to this particular topic here, because there's so many different layers and so many different crevices and directions that we could go. But we got to keep going. We're going to transition to action that actually took place on the gridiron last Saturday with respect to the SWAC. Now, for those of you who don't know, we're going to talk about Connor Maynor, head coach at Alabama A&M. Now, I've got the video footage, but the reason why I thought this particular, we're not going to necessarily talk about SWAC football in general, which I think I told you guys during the pregame meeting, it's just not really good right now. Hopefully it'll improve as the season progresses, but it is not very good. But Connell Maynor in particular is one individual that I thought we should discuss because of, I don't want to say antics, but because of what was said leading into Saturday's game against Southern. During SWAC Media Day, he indicated that while he had the game against Vanderbilt and that there was his non-conference schedule being what it is, that ultimately he's paid to win SWAC games. And I guess there's a certain element of truth to that when you put in consideration that you have to win SWAC games in order to get to the SWAC championship. And if you want to get to the Celebration Bowl, you have to win the SWAC championship. So theoretically speaking, that is correct. You have to win. He is paid to win SWAC games, and I guess anything else that he can win in the process of winning SWAC games is graded. However, Alabama A&M had a season opener against Southern, in which a SWAC game he lost. But what makes that particular loss to me a little bit more interesting is that when you put in consideration that this is a man who indicated that he is only paid to win SWAC games, well, if you go back to the 2022 season just last year, and you include the game against Southern, Connell Maynor has lost 4 of the last 5 SWAC games that his A&M team has played. So I think A&M folks might say Connell Maynor is on a hot seat, but he's got a Thursday game coming up against a UAPB team that has a head coach that I think is enthused. They had a pretty good showing early in the season opener against FBS Tulsa. They played inspired ball in that game. I think they held their own. I think it's safe to say they held their own in the Southern Heritage Classic against Tennessee State. And then, of course, there were some who, and I kind of thought maybe there was a possibility that Miles, after what they did to Alabama State, would possibly come in and go to UAPB and possibly take them down. But they managed to secure his first win of the season and the first win of his head coaching career at UAPB. And now he's got a Thursday matchup against A&M. What are your thoughts on Connell Maynor, his current progress given over the last 5 games, and his of what we could possibly expect going into this game Thursday? I guess the question is Connell Maynor on the hot seat?
It's hard to say that a game that will be played on September 22nd will be a must win, but this is pretty doggone close, I feel like, because they were talking about a team that did win. Let's not take anything away from Alabama A&M. They did win the pandemic SWAC championship in the spring of 2021. So let's not take that from them. But the last couple of regular years since we've gone back under, fall football have not gone well for Alabama A&M. And as a head coach of a college football program, you have to have some personality. You have to have some character. You have to, create sound bites and different things. When one of your sound bites is you barking on and it makes it to around the horn on ESPN, you kind of sort of have to,
It actually made Sports Center too.
Yeah, you got to back it up a little bit. And now, and granted, Southern Southern was desperate on Saturday, so maybe Southern's desperation is what threw Alabama A&M off last weekend. But right now, you got to, yeah, this is as close to must win as it gets for Alabama A&M because Pine Bluff under Alonzo Hampton has played a lot better, as you've stated. And this is a program that wants to get back. I mean, actually, these are two teams that played for the SWAC Spring Championship in 2021. So it's kind of like that T.S. Eliot poem that starts, "In my end is my beginning." So now we're starting to see if this is going to be the beginning of UAPB's rise back to prominence. Could it be the end of Connell Maynard's good graces at Alabama A&M? We'll find out.
Jared, you had some
Ken,
interesting comments before we started the pre-show meeting with respect to a comment that his player said during SWAC Media Day that you reminded us of. What was that, if you don't mind telling us?
Yeah, so Zarian Hayes, for those who don't know, is a Bulldogs Alabama A&M defensive lineman, and he was named to the All SWAC preseason team. So during SWAC Media Day, he actually guaranteed a championship for Alabama A&M, and this is not a very good start.
Yeah.
Not a very good start. This is a team that is still in the rebuilding stage. They're still trying to find their replacement for Aquil Glass, who was a two-time Black College Football Player of the Year. Uh, Gary Quarles, their former running back, who was very good against them playing for Southern. In that loss, he played. Yeah, he's now with Southern. I meant so. There's a lot going. And by the way, Brian Jenkins Jr. He's now at Prairie View A&M. So you have a lot of pieces that were on that championship team, and don't forget that Abdul Fattah Ibrahim and Odu Hilaire, two of former receivers, they're now in Bowling Green. So they're trying to rebuild this team, and I get being confident, but you got to be realistic. You can't go around guaranteeing SWAC championships. You can't go around barking, talking about we bark where our bite is bigger than our bark, and then losing in your SWAC opener. And you're losing SWAC. You're losing in your SWAC opener. You lost 4 last 5 SWAC games. You had a losing season last season after you were 7-3 in 2021. That, like, you have to assess what you actually have and be realistic about what you actually have. Now, if you thought that winning the SWAC was realistic for you, cool, understood. But you got to understand that when you lose, even after all that stuff, people are going to look at you and say, I don't know if you're going to be long for that spot, that chair. So that seat is starting to warm up a little bit. They lose this upcoming Thursday. It might start to get a little hot.
Kendra, you gonna say something?
yeah, this is the first time Connell Maynard has said something that backfired on him
I
leading up
knew
to a
you were
football
going there.
game.
I already know where you're going.
Yeah, for those who don't know, like in 2021, like Coach Maynard got some really got the big head and started yapping about, getting some more 5 stars to a certain coach, no longer in the SWAC. And there was a whole thing about a scooter that ended up at a 61-15 score, not in his favor on their homecoming. So yeah, Conor Maynard got to realize, man, like if he gonna say something or bark something out, he got to back it up, man. Because if he lose to Pine Bluff, like Jared said, like Chris said, like you got to start to question, like, is this man long for the job? Because like honestly, like they haven't been right as a football program since Aquil Glass graduated. Haven't been able to find a quarterback. In 2022, in the offseason, they loaded up on defensive players, thinking that they can compensate for the bad offense by getting good defensive players, and it hadn't worked out either. The offense is still bad. Their defense hasn't played consistently enough. So where is the right answers for Conor Maynard at this point? They have to win a SWAC game first. Then he could actually be paid to actually win a game, not just SWAC ones.
Yeah, and they've got Arkansas Pine Bluff. Then that following week it's Tuskegee, non-conference game, and then on August 7th, the Gulf Coast Challenge. That's against Jackson State, and Jackson State is one game behind FAMU. Oh, by the way, speaking of FAMU, they still have to play Alabama State and they still have to play FAMU. So I mean that division for A&M, considering where they are right now, man, that's going to be a tall order to overcome. But I appreciate the input because I felt the need to address Connell Maynard's situation, man, and the fact that he's done a lot of talking, but at some point you got to be able to talk that up. You got to back that talking with action. It just doesn't seem to be happening right now, but still a lot of football left. So let's move on and take a look at the Division Two ranks. And I know this has kind of been a topic that Chris and Jared have paid quite a bit of attention to with respect to the SIAC. And Chris, we'll start with you because it was you who kind of came up with the idea saying that this is something that we should talk about. And after giving it some thought, I think there may be some validity to it, and that you seem to think that given where things stand right now, and all four of the HBCU conferences, the SIAC currently is the best HBCU football conference out there.
I said that when we started, putting this together. There's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes when we do these things, y'all. So don't think we're just, getting on here, hopping on here with hot takes. No, we actually discuss things like true journalists. So that being said, the SIAC, if folks aren't familiar, for the last few years, they had an Eastern and Western division set up. And in December of last year, they announced that they are going back to the old school ways of one division. Now, if you're not familiar, the SIAC has 13 football playing members. So the top two will play in the conference championship game. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that Benedict is going to get there. I don't think that's a hot take at all. Probably could say the same for Tuskegee. But after those two, it's a very interesting mix of players. You've got Savannah State. Actually, let's start with Allen. Because Allen probably had the best game of the weekend. They were down to Kentucky State 30-7 going into the fourth quarter, 30-7. If your math isn't good, that's 23 points down. And, their quarterback threw 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. They came back and won 34-30 for a program that is entering the final year of its transition and will be eligible for SIAC championships next year. That is a huge step forward for Teddy Keaton and his crew, because right now they're 3-0. Granted, the 3-0 is, you can pick a different thing out about the 3-0. They played Erskine College, who has just restarted Division II. It counts, but they had maybe like 3 or 4 scholarships. They played Columbus State's club team, and I don't think a club team counts towards your overall record. But they won that game. But they did win an SIAC game against a Kentucky State program that still could make some noise this year. I mean, they just had a string of bad luck the last 2 weeks. But this Allen team is probably one of the ones that you look forward to in the future. Probably the same for Edward Waters, even though they're 0-3 at this point. That the SIAC is in good hands because you've got at least 6 or 7 schools out of the 13 that could jump up and make a trip to the Division II tournament. You've got, again, Benedict, Allen, and Tuskegee are 3-0. Savannah State, Savannah State, Fort Valley, and Miles are 2-1. That's a pretty good top 6. And granted, the Division II playoff structure is a little different than, the FCS because, they break it down by like super regions and different things of that nature. And the unfortunate thing is every single year since I've been paying attention to this, which probably been like since like 2012, 2013-ish, that the CIAA and the SIAC magically happen to be in the same region, super region at the same time. And they end up playing each other in the first round sometimes. Or they end up going to like a PSAC school. If you're not familiar, I'm from Delaware. The Pennsylvania State Athletic Conference is just above me. And those schools are tough. But, as I talked to Sean Gibbs for Fort Valley's preview, he said we got to start winning these games against these schools to prove that we belong. So for right now, I feel like the SIAC, from top to bottom, even though there are some teams on the struggle boat, those teams on the struggle boat could easily get on the yacht to success very quickly. So I feel like out of 13 teams, you could probably say like 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 could be decent. And I feel like Benedict is the one that tops them all. I feel like Benedict would actually challenge North Carolina Central for the MEAC. Yes, I'm saying.
Jared?
I don't know if the SIAC is the best HBCU conference, but I can tell you this. Benedict is easily the best HBCU football team this season.
Oh,
I don't think that's close.
oh.
Wow.
That I get it, Florida A&M, get it, North Carolina Central, but they have literally only given up one touchdown in 3 games and three quality opponents. Also, they have an offense that we had questions about because their quarterback Eric Phoenix he transferred to Murray State in the offseason. They still have a loaded running back room that stars Noah Zaire Scotland and DeAndre Duhart, and the quarterback that they replaced Eric Phoenix with, Aeneas Dennis, he has completed 67% of his passes, had 5 touchdowns and no interceptions. They have not missed a beat. And Lubert Danellis, their defensive end, he is a monster playmaking machine. He, if he doesn't get any NFL considerations or training camp considerations, I will be on the front line of the Army on what is it, X now? Just I will have a bunch of think pieces and rants of
Some
that
call
man does not get a shot.
it.
Yeah, I mean that team, I really believe that they might be. Forget just the best HBCU team; they're one of the best teams in Division II football, and I know they had a disappointing Division II playoff run. They lost in their opener against Wingate, but I feel like they are better and stronger than they were last year, and I think that they would if they run the table, which I expect them to do. I feel like they will have a much better outcome in the Division II playoffs. But as far as the competition that they have to face, I think Miles is much improved from what they. I mean, they have to be. They only won one game last year, but Miles is much improved. Savannah State is much improved. Tuskegee still is a very good player in the SIAC. Their wide receiver Antonio Meeks is insane, a supreme athlete. And Allen. I mean, their quarterback David Wright had 400 something yards in that game, and you said they were down 30-7. They were down 30-7 entering the fourth quarter. That is very important that you have to say. They were down 30-7 entering the fourth quarter. So I'm not sure if they're for real yet, but that Kentucky State game definitely got my eyes open, and I'm waiting to see, when they start to get into the thick of their conference schedule, how they're going to look. So is the SIAC currently the best HBCU conference? Too early to say, but they're definitely the most fun to watch right now.
Okay, so you guys might need to help me familiarize me or get me refamiliar with the process and with and how the selection committee works once we get to selection time with Division II playoffs. But given where the SIAC is right now with its current teams and the way they're operating in the current clip, how many teams could we from the SIAC could we possibly see in the playoffs by the end of the season?
Ah, I don't know, honestly, because I feel like Benedict and Tuskegee are the best two, but the problem is Tuskegee still has the Thanksgiving Day Classic with Alabama State, so they probably won't be able to make it.
Yeah.
And which is, and of course, you got to think about how Miles is going to finish, how Savannah is going to finish, how Fort Valley or Kentucky State or Allen are going to finish. So I feel like Benedict might be, unfortunately, as good as that conference is, they might be the lone representative unless Allen or Savannah State or Fort Valley can win 8 or 9 games, which is possible for either. Well, actually, Allen isn't even eligible because they're still under a Division II transitional period, so they aren't eligible for the tournament either. So it would probably have to be like Fort Valley or Savannah State would have to jump up and win 8 or 9 games to probably make that a 2-team league for a playoff spot.
Yeah. Well, we given the success of Benedict and what we've seen over them, especially over the last 2 to 3 seasons, we talked about the possibility of Shennis Berry and the possible speculation and rumors that are circulating around him possibly being the person who could possibly replace Buddy Pugh at South Carolina State. And we've got to move on, but your thoughts about that rumor? even though it's really early.
Yeah, I think if he is not their first call, they are making a mistake. You got look at his. If you look at his track record, you know people know he's put his name on the map with what he's doing at Benedict, but he didn't start at Benedict. You know he's been around. He was at Kentucky State. He was at North Carolina A&T. He was at Southern when Southern was going on their SWAC division championship run and was a part of their 2013 SWAC championship team as the offensive coordinator. So he has the credentials. You know
Well,
what I
he was
mean? And
a finalist for the UAPB job, and there were a lot of people who kind of scratched their head when UAPB decided to go with Hampton. And I wonder what was the what factors led into that decision. But he was a finalist for that job.
yeah, and I feel like he deserves that opportunity to be a head coach at Division I level because he has done it everywhere he's been. You know what I mean? He's a guy that's HBCU bred. He actually attended at HBCU. You know what I mean? So he has what it takes to lift South Carolina State back up. It's only been what 1 or 2 years that South Carolina State has been down in the dumps, but I feel like he can get them immediately right back on track because he's done it everywhere he's been.
We're gonna keep it Division II. We're gonna go to the CIAA, in which there appears to be a log jam. And again, this is one of those topics that Chris Stephens brought to our attention because of I don't know if it's been mediocre play, but there doesn't really appear to be a team that's just completely dominating at this point, Chris.
I think it's fair to say that right now the CIAA has kind of been victimized by their own success. I mean, they play each other very tough, and I don't think it's. And granted, we're talking about the team that won the conference last year, Fayetteville State. They ran into two very good Division II programs in UMC Pembroke, and who else did they play? We'll figure that out later. But
You talking about so far this year?
yeah,
Lenore
they,
Ryan.
Lenore
yeah,
Ryan.
Lenore Ryan and UNC Pembroke. Those are two teams that are usually in the thick of the D2 playoffs, and they lost those two games by like one possession. And then, of course, they beat Lincoln, who's much improved by one possession last week. So, but I feel like the North is where, you can probably pick a either more clear-cut favorite between Bowie and Virginia Union. Bowie State's defense, which I've seen in person, unfortunately, at Delaware State, is quite nasty. Feature Uvel Paul in the middle, Jaden Carter on the corners, Mikhail Salahuddin at the safety spot. That's a tough team. They had a little bit of a struggle offensively against Shaw. They had two quarterbacks playing on Saturday. Amir Jenkins got pulled early for Ace Williams, but unfortunately for Bowie, Ace Williams has a knee injury. He got hurt, left on the cart, which we hate to see. We want to wish that young man well. Hopefully he comes back in full strength. So it looks like this is Amir Jenkins' team for the long run. And he's a tough quarterback, but he struggled against Shaw's defense. Shaw's defense is really good. But you can pick Bowie, you can pick Virginia Union, who of course has probably the top running back in all Division II, and Jada Byers. But the South, it's a little more interesting. You still have, Johnson C. Smith is 2-1. Surprisingly enough, Winston-Salem State finally broke out of their doldrums. They beat Elizabeth City State last week, and of course Fayetteville State is 1-2. So between those 3 or 4 teams in the South, it's going to be very, very. Again, before we got started, Jared said I have more faith in Shaw than he does, but I still believe that Shaw can make it tough on everybody else in that Southern Division. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the CIAA South plays out.
It goes without saying. So I mean, is it too early to make any predictions at this point, Jared?
Entirely too early. Entirely too early. We talked about Virginia Union and people probably don't even know Jada Byers didn't even play last week. He suffered an injury the week before, so he didn't play. He didn't play in this game, and they still beat who was it? Livingstone, I believe they beat.
St. Aug.
And St. Aug. So that all
They didn't.
there's so yeah, it was Livingstone. It was Livingstone. They beat Livingstone. So
Okay.
Virginia Union. If Jada Byers is able to come back, and even if they aren't, even if he isn't able to come back, they have some talented backs. They have some talented backs that have some good games in that Livingstone game. Of course, Bowie State. Who knows about Bowie State? What is Bowie State? I don't even know what Bowie State is. I'm kidding. I'm a Bowie State alum. Of course, I know that Bowie State's defense is a monster. It. I think the offense has a lot to be desired. But I know one thing is that one thing we have bred is great quarterbacks. Amir Hall was a former Black College Football Player of the Year. Jerome Johnson's former Conference Player of the Year. Deion Galat was a all conference selection. So if I have faith in one thing when it comes to Bowie State's offense is that we're going to produce a great quarterback that's going to make plays. And Amir Jenkins in our season opener, he made plays against Delaware State, but so I think with time under center, I think he'll start to get more comfortable, and the offense will get more comfortable, and the offense will be able to go as the defense goes. Virginia State, their running back Upton Bailey is very talented. I think he's the guy that people should focus on because he is supremely talented. If Bowie State breds quarterbacks, Virginia State breds running backs. From Trenton Cannon to now Upton Bailey and Darius Hagans, who's now with who I believe was with the Pittsburgh Steelers for a little while. You know what I mean? So they produce some running backs and they have a defense that makes plays. They last year they led Division II in turnovers forced. So it's a lot that's at the top of the North, and even Lincoln. With Isaiah Freeman, who might arguably be the best quarterback in the CIAA. I think they're starting to make some noise too. I'm not sure if they're ready to contend yet, but they're gonna give a team some go if they don't take them seriously. And now as far as the South, Fayetteville State, it's not as cut and dry as it has been in years past for them. They're without their two top defenders, Cameron Morrell, who seemingly was supposed to be returning. He was named to the all-conference preseason team, but he hasn't played a game this season. And Devin Cowan, he transferred to, I believe it was Southern Illinois. So they're without their two best defenders, So I'm not sure if they still have that if they have that championship swagger like they had last year. Shaw, they have some talented individual players. Let me say that. Sidney Gibbs, the running back that they have, Andre Brandon, they have the guy they have behind him. I think they're very talented. They have a loaded defensive back room. Jay Boyd is very talented, but I'm not sure if Shaw is ready to turn that corner. And if they do get to the conference championship game, I'd pick whoever they're playing against. To be honest, Winston-Salem State is still.
What about Winston State? Yeah, that's go ahead. What about Winston State?
They haven't shown any signs at all that they're ready to get back to championship contention. They have not. They've pretty much toed the line. They haven't been better. They haven't been worse. They've just been okay. You know what I mean? And that's been the CIAA South for a long time. It's been not great and it's not horrible. It's just there's nobody that really sticks out. When you look at the North, I look at Virginia State and say if they get to the championship game, they'll win it. If I look at Bowie State and say if they get there, they'll win it. Same thing with Virginia Union. There's nobody in the South that I look at and say if they get to the CIAA championship game, they are going to win it. Now, granted, Johnson C. Smith has had a very good 3-game stretch. They had 6 turnovers in their second game and were still 1 possession away from winning that game. So if they become more disciplined, maybe they can become a team that I can see and say, oh, they can get to the championship game. But there's nobody that has made a big impression. Now, granted, the season is still early and there's still a lot of time, but the CIAA South has a lot of work to do before I think they can compete with any team in the North.
And then there was the MEAC. The MEAC went 0-5 this past Saturday. And in fairness, 2 of those losses were to FBS institutions. But the game, or should I say the MEAC game of the week, obviously was the Battle of the Real HU. And if Hampton's win over Howard is any indication, I guess it's safe to say Hampton, as it stands right now, is the real champion. Jared, you were particularly interested in talking about this particular game, but and I got a chance to see bits and pieces of it. You were actually there in person. What are your takeaways from that contest?
Just I common sense. Common sense is important. First of all, shout out to my mom, Hampton grad. That they won that game. But Howard just okay, let's have a lesson in common sense. So let's say you guys are coaching a football team. You're up 31-14. You give up a touchdown. Cool. You're still up 31-21. You go on a long drive and you're not able to get into the end zone, but you score a field goal. So you're up 34-21. Then Hampton gets the ball. You're able to keep them out of the end zone, and you're even able to turn it over on downs, so you get the ball back with 10 minutes to go in the game. Now, as a head coach, what do you do on offense? Now to help with this scenario, you have Ian Wheeler, running back, Jared Hunter, running back, Casey Hawthorne, who is a wide receiver, but they use him in the running game. Your quarterback is having a pretty good game. He's 19 for 30 passing. But it's the fourth quarter with 10 minutes to go, and you're up 34-21. What do? You run it, right?
Yeah.
To run the clock, right? Is that what Howard did? No, it's not. They passed the ball. They threw 3 incomplete passes, and they were forced to punt. Hampton gets the ball back. They score. Cool. It's 34-28. It's still 8 minutes and 2 seconds to go. Now, same scenario. On offense, what do? Remember, you have the 2 running backs, Jared Hunter. You have Ian Wheeler. You have Casey Hawthorne, who they use in the run game. But you have a quarterback who's now 19 for 34 passing. Do you go with the running backs or do you go with the quarterback? Running backs, right? No. They went with the quarterback through 3 incomplete passes and were forced to punt. Now, I know what you're thinking. They must have ran a bunch of time off of this clock. Hampton must not have had a lot of time. That drive took 7 seconds. 7 seconds. I've never in my life seen a quicker drive from a team that was leading.
Oh man.
Hampton gets the ball back. They score. Now, there is 3 minutes left. So now, same scenario. You're down now. You need to get into field goal range. But if you get a touchdown, that's cool too. You have a quarterback who, even though he's had strung together some bad drives, he's still supremely efficient in this game. What does Howard do? They run the ball. They ran the ball. They were running the ball. And you know what's worse about it? They were actually moving it down the field. They were moving it down the field. I'm like, I was in the booth with, shout out to draft HBCU players. They were in the booth with me watching the game. And we're looking at each other and saying, when they start running the ball, we were like, why were they just doing this when they were up? But you were up. They start moving the ball down the field. And ironically, the drive ends with an interception. They finally decided to pass, and he throws an interception. I don't know who is responsible for that. But I know that he was not looked at favorably among the Howard crowd. I wish I would have just went down.
Go ahead. Who are we talking about?
I need to look up their offensive coordinator or somebody, whoever was in charge of calling the plays. I wish I would have been on Howard's sideline. I mean, not on Howard's sideline, in the Howard crowd. I wish I wasn't in the media booth. I wish I would have been in the crowd to hear what they were saying, because I can't imagine that they were looking at and they they had players running down the field trying to hype up the crowd the whole time. Howard was hyped. They they were just so excited. And then when Hampton started scoring, the energy went down, and as it should, because that was a game that they should not have lost. They looked like the better team throughout the game. But I will say Hampton had the better player. Elijah Barris, who I talked to after the game, he was, man, and he had the 90-yard touchdown that started the run that got him back into the game. But Howard, they better get it. I know one thing. I know one team I would not want to be is Norfolk State, because Howard next week is idle. Next 3 weeks they go to Harvard, they go to Northwestern, and they play one more team. All of those are on the road. The next time Howard is back in DC, it's for homecoming against Norfolk State. And I know one thing: Howard is not coming in that game to lose. So I know Norfolk State better be ready, because I know that Howard is fuming after that one. And they should be, because they should not have lost that game.
Jared, we're gonna have to come up with some way to we're gonna name the segment or something. I'm telling you now, I'm cutting this segment out. We're gonna put this.
Yeah, Ken, like for Howard, like
No,
this was
comments.
supposed yeah, for Howard, this was supposed to be their season where they proved that
Yeah.
last year wasn't a fluke.
Yep.
And you heard the comment Trey Oliver saying like their rings were kind of counterfeit from winning the MEAC championship. And so they start the season 1-2 now, and they lose to their rival for the seventh time in a row.
By the way, they've lost. Yeah, I was about to say 7 times in a row.
It's 7 times in a row. They lose to their rival. So if you're Larry Scott, man, and now you're playing this schedule, they're going to put you on the road for the next month. You really have to battle. I know the MEAC is still winnable, but still, like, this loss literally could set them back for the entire season because of what was expected of them going into the season. Howard has a lot of really good players, as Jared pointed out. They seemingly are in a position to compete for a MEAC championship, but, like, you can't beat North Carolina Central doing this. You can't even beat Morgan State, who's a really improved football team, doing this. So Larry Scott in the second full season got a lot to think about the next few weeks and how to get over this loss, because honest with you, that was the worst loss to any school over the weekend. I'm counting all the schools that lost FBS programs too. Like, that was the very worst loss possible for a team like Howard.
Yeah, again, Jared and Kendrick have said it all. The only thing I can say is that this is going back to when we started talking about barks and bites. Like, when you set yourself up for things, you put yourself in a position to be open to criticism, open to the jokes and different things. And the part that probably is going to have Hampton alums clowning Howard for the foreseeable future is that, remember, Hampton, as we reported late Friday afternoon, were down a few players because of a little bit of thing called eligibility clearance issue.
Oh wow, yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you add into that, you add into losing a double-digit lead to a short-handed Hampton University team, you are just going to leave yourself open to the jokes. And the jokes, as we know in black college sports, this whole culture is built off of jokes. I mean, there used to be a message board called MEAC Fans, where there would be times when fans from different MEAC schools would actually be ready to fight each other over the words that were being traded across message boards. So, if you're a Howard alum, if you're a Howard player, if you're a Howard coach, you literally have to be sitting with yourself right now, like, that old Spinner song, "How Did I Let You Get Away?" How they let that game get away? And again, they got this little Ivy League stretch, this little to-do stretch where they've got Harvard, Northwestern, Yale, I think is the one other school Jared was mentioning, that if you're gonna get your butt kicked by two Ivies and a Big Ten, that doesn't leave you much margin for error when you come back to MEAC play. So Howard definitely, as Kendrick said, has to get on the ball, or else this is going to be a lost season. And that championship last year that they've claimed, the first one since Ted White and all those guys, looks like it's just going to be on paper.
You know what? Since you mentioned, Chris, about the eligibility issue related to Hampton, I mean, what are we to make of that? And what does it say about? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's a silver lining to it, but I mean, um, I guess there were some who, when you put in consideration the eligibility issues that it were facing going into this game against Howard, you would automatically assume that maybe Howard had a upper hand going into this game, given what they were facing. But the results of the game aside, what are we to make about Hampton of all places? And I mean, I think it's safe to say that Hampton has a academic reputation of being one of the so-called elite academic HBCUs in the country. But yet we have an issue of individuals not necessarily being eligible to play. And just so folks know, this isn't necessarily about individuals passing classes as much as it is about, from what I could gather, just looking at the staff directory, there are a lot of positions in positions of compliance and even student services that, based upon that staff directory, aren't they have no positions. There are no names. You look at the positions and it's NA, not available. One individual who I'm aware of, he made it known that Hampton is notorious for not being able to pay its staff in the athletic department. And apparently that is something that is not surprising. So, I mean, was anyone surprised by that? Or, I mean, do you guys know something that I don't?
That to me is absolutely very surprising, because not just from the academic standpoint, but Hampton, has always been thought of as, like you said, one of the elite academic institutions. They hold themselves to that standard. Like, there was still, like, I'll never forget when I was in school, there was the talk about, kids couldn't, have locked hair or braids or different things of that
Right.
nature at Hampton, and different, and, like, they were just like clean cut,
Yeah.
and, you expected better from them. And I think it's also a symptom of a larger problem, the staff positions, because I mean, granted, HBCUs are the most underfunded institutions in this country. And when you take into the fact that Hampton is a private institution, which means they receive no funding from the state of Virginia. So it's not like they could
Yeah.
they could raise Cain and say, "Oh, Virginia's shorting us." They're a
Yeah.
private institution, so everything that they bring in is what they bring in, So
Right.
if you're unable to pay your your athletic staff or even your academic staff, then that's going to lead to some problems as an institution. And I feel like that's something that was surprising for Hampton, because they were, at one time probably the richest HBCU, at least on the East Coast anyway. Like, I can't speak
Mhm.
for the AUC schools or anyone in the SWAC, but definitely among the MEAC schools, it was them and Howard. Now that they've moved from the MEAC to the Big South to the Colonial, and as I told Ken in a conversation once again when we were putting this together, that the Colonial, well, not the Colonial anymore, they're the Coastal Athletic
The
Conference.
coastal. Yeah.
And those folks over there don't take kindly to being embarrassed by any institution.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
they've been trying to gently guide Rhode Island out of the football sphere for God knows how many years. And
Mhm.
Rhode Island is just like Jennifer Holiday. And I am telling you, they just refuse. They're still going to play football until the wheels fall off.
Right.
But as far as everybody else goes, they're not, and a black institution coming in and embarrassing the Coastal. Oh no! Especially since I'm in Delaware and I know how UD gets down. They can be a little nasty behind the scenes. So it wouldn't surprise me if that has come up in conversations privately among the administration in that conference. So this is tough for Hampton. They've got to find their way out of this, because it's not going to get any easier on the field or off the field.
Before we wrap up on the MEAC, there is one other game I think we agreed to discuss, and that was the game between North Carolina Central and UCLA. And I don't think anyone is surprised by the outcome, but I think there may be some individuals who are somewhat either surprised or maybe even disappointed in the performance of Davius Richard. What are we to say? What do you guys think about that? Is it Richard or Richard? Richard, right?
Yeah, I
Richard.
mean, like it was surprising to like see that performance because this was probably the one game he would play this year where he would have a lot of attention from scouts to see like if he could like really prove himself to be an NFL draft eligible quarterback. And the Bruins defense, they really did a number on him. He was 5 for 13 for 28 yards against UCLA on Saturday. He had an interception in there too. Just didn't look comfortable, just didn't get in the rhythm. I mean, like it's kind of hard, like when you're offensive line trying to block Power Five guys, but like they couldn't establish anything, and like he unfortunately was kind of like the recipient of some of that deficiency on the offensive line. But like yeah, like he didn't really get to show like what we saw like the last couple of years, him being like this dynamic dual threat quarterback, the quarterback who was the best player on the field, which Deion Sanders on it last year in the Celebration Bowl. And it was unfortunate that like he didn't have performance that kind of speaks highly of like how we all think of him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think what it is that it is what you expect when you have the 24th ranked team in FCS against a school that doesn't have the same resources, that doesn't have the same weight training, that doesn't have the same cachet. And yes, it's going to be disappointing for Davius Richard that he didn't get to strut his stuff against UCLA, but you could take any HBCU and put them out there against UCLA and you're probably going to get the same result. But I think if people are going to miss the boat on him because of that, then they're doing themselves a disservice because
I
this
agree.
young man reminds me so much of another number 11 big raw bone black quarterback from Florida named Dante Culpepper.
Yeah.
So if people can just, watch what he does. I mean, granted, you want Trey Oliver said it in the MEAC coaches conference. You want your guys to be able to be seen against superior talent. And no, he didn't do very well. But then again, not too many of our schools would have done well against UCLA. But you put him up against a Delaware State, you put him up against Howard, you put him against Morgan State, you put him up against the Jackson State. He's going to do work. And there's not that much difference anymore. Yes, there's still a sizable gap. Let's not get it twisted. There's a sizable gap, but that gap isn't as David versus Goliath as it used to be. So the same guys that he'll see in MEAC play, he'll probably end up seeing in the NFL at some point. So I think, it's disappointing that, Central got their doors blown off and Richard had to leave early. But if people are going to miss the boat on that for him, then that's their loss because I still feel like he's an NFL quarterback. That's just me.
I was just about to say that just real quick. For anybody questioning why he didn't play as much, if once your team gives up 35 points in the first quarter, it's kind of like why even put him in the game and risk injury? You know what I mean? Even if let's just say for the sake of argument, he goes out there and he completes 8 straight passes and he looks good, but then he gets clipped and now he has a torn ACL or now he has a torn Achilles. That was the best possible decision. You know what I mean? I mean, not the best possible, but that was a very good decision, to get him out that game. Nobody surprised by the outcome. Of course we hoped that he could have went out there and maybe went 20 for 33 passing and had 256 yards and 2 touchdowns or something like that. Of course, but UCLA is not. It's not. I mean, they're a Pac-12 team. They're a nationally ranked team. That nobody's surprised that they overwhelmed him and he wasn't able to get comfortable. I mean, they literally scored on their first 2 plays, not their first 2 drives, their first 2 plays. They scored. So that this isn't a knock on Davius Richard or North Carolina Central. They're just playing against a team that is elite. That's just it.
And we couldn't end this discussion on the MEAC without one other topic before we wrap up this show. And if you guys aren't aware, there was a former North Carolina A&T running back, Jermaine Martin, who went on Twitter, and I think, Jared, you've got the contents of that tweet, but basically he expressed his displeasure in North Carolina A&T's decision to leave the MEAC to, at that time, join the Big South Conference, and then of course they left the Big South, and they're currently in the CAA. Jared, do you have that tweet and what he indicated in that? Was it on Twitter or on social media?
Yeah.
What did he say?
Yeah, the app formerly known as Twitter, it's now known as X, but whatever. So he started off saying, I'm rocking with A&T to the death of me, but dang, y'all killing me. I can't even pop it, talk, speak freely how I want to. I started with AD Earl, changing conferences just for money, not thinking about the culture. I feel like he sold us out. He continued on what 5, 6, 7 tweets about them losing their strength coach, who he called their secret weapon, and talking about them playing Towson for homecoming, and said that if he wanted to go to a school that played Towson homecoming, they would have just went to UNC Greensboro. And then he talked about they changed they changed from the Big South to the CAA, and they didn't even win the Big South. So I think he's sharing the grief, and he's not the only one. I saw somebody that said that this feels like the beginning of the Lee Fobbs era. This felt like this is going to be another Lee Fobbs era. Now, just to play devil's advocate, North Carolina A&T did start last year 0-3. To be fair, and they ended up 7-4, and they were one win away from the Big South title. But you're not in the Big South this year. You're not in the Big South this year. You're in the CAA, which is one of the biggest powerhouse conferences in FCS football. And yes, you have Norfolk State next week. Well, not next week, 2 weeks from now. But it doesn't get easier after that. So as far as his tweets, I think he's sharing what a lot of people feel down in North Carolina A&T. It just feels like their AD saying that this is and I'm paraphrasing because I don't know his exact words, but he feels like this is a forward thinking move going to the CAA. But it's looking like nobody's really seeing his vision right now.
Man, look, there is so much to unpack, and I don't want to necessarily revisit A&T's decision to leave the MEAC, but if memory serves me correctly, and ADs do this a lot, and I get it. There is a line. ADs are responsible ultimately for doing whatever is in the best interest of the school that employs them. And keep in mind, moving from the MEAC or leaving a conference isn't a move that an athletic director can just up and just say, I want to, we need to do this. That requires approval from obviously the higher ups, the president, who ultimately, and then I guess depending on the system in which the school is located in, it probably even requires the okay of the Board of Regents. But going back to that decision, I specifically remember that A&T's rationale for leaving was because it's always to do what's in the best interest of the student athlete. It's always to do what's in the best interest of the student athlete. And I think the logic at the time, and I think some talked about it was about the geographic footprint, and supposedly there were some who had some issues with the MEAC's geographic footprint when you put in consideration some had to go from Dover, Delaware, all the way down to, Tallahassee or Daytona Beach. I guess in theory that is quite a bit, but when you put in consideration where A&T is located, which in that case was almost centrally per se, it wasn't really a whole lot. And it wasn't as if when they made the move to the Big South, that the footprint got much smaller. I mean, they still at that time had to make trips down, or I think Kennesaw State was in the conference, and you had to go to Kennesaw, Georgia, and things of that nature. So you fast forward to where we are right now, and believe me, there have been a lot of comments made, not only about A&T, but even comments made about Hampton making that move. And the term sellout comes to mind, and I guess my point is, do any of you know if, and maybe I'll tell you now, I may need to reach out Mr. Martin and see if we can possibly get him on and talk to him, because I am curious to know that when A&T made the decision to leave the MEAC, were any of the student athletes asked? Were any of the student athletes asked to provide feedback? Because I think that what Jermaine Martin states is a very valid reason. You know, we go to HBCUs, the culture it plays a huge role in making that decision, and part of that culture is based upon who they play, and it's a very valid point. You know, homecoming, and especially at an HBCU. I mean, you know, those things are legendary, especially if you're on the outside looking in. But it is very much a real thing. So you know, I get it. If you're an administrator, it's always business and it's always a financial reason. But I really, when they say it's all about for the best interest of the student athlete, at some point it really becomes, in my mind, lip service. All you got to do is just look at the realignment of schools, whether it be in the Power Fives or FCS. I mean, you know, the Pac-12 is now the Pac-2. And we got schools, you know, UCLA and USC are going to join the Big Ten. And they're going to be playing Maryland for conference games. I mean, think about that. So is this really, we know it's about the money, but I just think that, you know, maybe Jermaine Martin deserves credit for stating something publicly that a lot of individuals have said on social media for quite some time now. Go ahead, Jared.
So I just want to, this is something I just remembered. So Kayron Prunty, who is a defensive back for North Carolina A&T, he shared this during the off season. I'm not sure if this is his post, but this is a picture that he shared of a post that says, people are questioning why so many people are transferring from North Carolina A&T. It's because they are tired of being ignored by the AD Earl Hilton in North Carolina A&T. As a former player from 2017 to 2022, I have witnessed it firsthand how the lack of resources we have for our sports teams as a whole is pitiful. We have tried to meet with the AD as a leadership during the season on numerous occasions after being told he would show up from our head coach, but it never seemed to happen. Athletes have a voice and want to be heard. Now, people will remember their leading rusher from last season, Bashul Tootin. He transferred, and two of their top defenders, Jacob Roberts and BJ Davis. I mean, excuse me, not BJ Davis, but Jacob Roberts, he transferred, and I'm forgetting the other defender that transferred. And Jacob Roberts, he recently had a big game against Old Dominion for Wake Forest. He had 4 sacks and 3.5 tackles for loss for Wake Forest. You know, so this is not something that's just new. He shared that in December of last year. So this is not something that was that has just now, just all of a sudden, just been happening. This is sentiments that have been heard for months. So just wanted to put that out there, that this is not nothing new. That Jermaine Martin is not the first one, and I'm almost certain he won't be the last one to air out his grievances. And I think A.D. Hinton, he needs to take heed sooner rather than later, because I'm pretty sure there's going to be some athletes on the picket line if he doesn't get it straight.
Wow.
Yeah.
And correct me if this is probably the first time that a former student athlete has actually said something publicly, right? Now, I mean, you now, Jerry, that was when was that made? That statement.
So Kayron Prunty, he still plays for the team, but he shared that in December of last year. December 5th. It says that he shared that December 15th, 2022.
You were going to say something, Chris?
Oh, no. I thought you asked me when he shared it.
No,
That's
I
when he shared
thought someone was about to say something.
Yeah, it was me. I think what we're seeing here is 53 years in the making, honestly, when it comes to the MEAC. Granted, it was a good idea in 1970, but in 2023, I don't think anybody predicted that we were going to see the amount of realigning and shifting that we've seen in college sports. Because you have to remember, when the MEAC started in 1970, 1971, there was no NIL. There was no cable. There was no streaming. There were just you either saw Texas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, USC, Michigan, Ohio State on ABC, or you didn't see college football at all. Now you can pick up your phone and you can pour through that and say, hey, I wonder if my alma mater is playing today. Yeah, let's see what they're talking about. Or you can click your TV, find a stream there, find it on your laptop. The money has changed in college sports so quickly, and that's why I don't begrudge these kids for getting their money through NIL, because they weren't able to in the past. And now that the money has changed, so dramatically that we're going to have, like Ken said, USC and UCLA in the Big Ten. We're going to have Stanford in the ACC, for crying out loud. Stanford in the ACC, a Pacific Northwest school in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Only in 2023 could this happen.
Stanford and Cal.
And Cal, yes.
And SMU.
Eric Dickerson and them were ahead of their time, man. I ain't gonna lie to you. Pony Express was way ahead of his time. But I think what we're starting to see is that, from a MEAC standpoint, at least from North Carolina A&T standpoint, that these kids now, they were sold a dream, and now they feel like that dream has just been a one big lie. And that's something that maybe Deion Sanders had a point about the lack of foresight with respect to certain administrations. I'm not saying this about Jackson State. I'm not saying about Delaware State. I'm just saying about the ways of thinking is that HBCUs we've been gifted this unique experience for the last 130 years, because the Morrill Land Grant Act was enacted in 1890. If people aren't familiar, the Morrill Act said that free slaves could, get a piece of land and develop their own institutions. Delaware State is a Morrill Act institution. A&T is one. I think North Carolina Central and Norfolk State and are among others. So for 130 years, we've been gifted this unique experience of being able to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, to quote Booker T. Washington, from the ground up, and be able to make something out of nothing. But now the kids are starting to see that the kids don't feel like that something out of nothing experience isn't enough, especially if we're moving from the solidarity that Black college football and Black college sports have had for the last 100 years. Because, like I said in the chat, to quote Leon, is David Eli Ruffin, ain't nobody coming to see Towson. Not for the greatest homecoming on earth. Not a chance. Like, I would honestly, I'm gonna and I said something very untoward about Virginia University of Lynchburg on our last podcast, but I'm gonna say this. People would probably rather see A&T play VUL than Towson. Their homecoming. I would put money on that. I'm on the screen. On the screen.
Yeah, Chris. A&T hasn't played a Black college on homecoming since 2019, man.
Oh my God, man. We got stats.
That's 4 years
now.
ago. That's pre-pandemic. So like the people in North Carolina, they starving, man. They want the experience. Like Ken said, like these kids were like so inexperienced. Because college is about experience you have at the university.
Yes.
When you go out in the world, and like if that experience is something you ain't having, like you're gonna wonder, like, hey, like what am I paying my money for? Like, why am I here? Like, why am I investing in this? And so like Jermaine Martin and others in North Carolina Central, they like, hey, we came to play at a Black college to play against Black schools, not against Elon, not against Campbell, not against these other schools that we know our fan base won't support us playing. And so like, but at the end of the day, a lot of these schools are leaving conferences and realigning to chase the bag. That's all it's for. Like a lot of it is for survival. Like the Pac-12 schools had to break up and go to the Big Ten and go to the ACC for survival. And to a certain extent, some schools left the MEAC are doing the same thing for survival, because they see the MEAC either not investing in long-term success, or they see the MEAC starting to crumble and will crumble in a couple of years. But like Chris said, like schools are going to have the foresight to balance like business and provide that student experience that a lot of these athletes want. Because because a lot of people talk about black colleges having a unique experience from PWIs, but like if your black college is like a PWI, then what are you really selling?
Ooh, ooh,
It's
ooh.
true, yeah. I mean, like Hampton gets that, Tennessee State gets that because they're formulating a hockey team that's going to come in 2024, 2025.
Yeah.
That's not a traditional black sport either. So like HBCUs have to like reimagine for sure, but like how far do you stretch from your culture in order to do that?
Wow. Wow. Gentlemen, it has been an experience. I know we went a little bit over time, but I think these conversations are necessary, and we're going to do it again real soon. All of you, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to to watch us. By all means, before you leave, please subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button so that you'll be notified of future live streams. Jared Hoffman, Chris Stevens, Kendrick Marshall, gentlemen, thank you so much. We'll see you guys next time. God bless you all.